Trader Cobb Crypto Podcast. This is the Trader Cobb Crypto Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Trader Cobb Crypto Show. Another fantastic guest in Trace Meyer, host of the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast and the very first Bitcoin evangelist. Trace, thank you so much for being on the show, mate.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. Help your audience out.
Yeah, look, mate, it's been a very, very intense last couple of days for me, and I'm enjoying it to no end. My fascination with you, Trace, is first, before we get into the side of the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and some of your, I think claim to fame is the wrong way of putting it, but you've definitely made some big calls and been very, very, very right and made a lot of people a lot of money. Where were you prior to being in Bitcoin, and what were you doing? What made Bitcoin stand out for you?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a multifaceted question. All the way from when I was a tiny kid, I was entrepreneurial and very interested in money. And then I saw Napster and BitTorrent and things like eGold and Gold Money. And then law school, I wrote papers about money and the legal side of stuff. And so when I ran into, actually about a couple years before Bitcoin even existed, I had a blog called run2gold.com. And there I would talk about finance and economics and sound money and kind of the big dichotomy that we have between what's called political currency and then sound money, and how that intersects with human civil liberties, human rights, political institutions, the role of the state, all of that stuff, and how it impacts our daily life. And so that's really where I came from when it came to Bitcoin. And then, like you said, I mean, I was the first person to talk about this when it was between a nickel a quarter. And then every previous major bull run in Bitcoin, I've called it in advance publicly in interviews, like all over the place. In fact, this recent one that went to 20,000, I was out beating the drum when it was about $600 saying we're going to $3,500. And sure enough, within about 6 months, it went to 3,500 and then kept going like it usually does.
Can I please have a quick rub of your genie bottle and find out where we're going to next?
Yeah, I mean, I put most of our stuff out on Twitter. You know, I have @TraceMayer, and Preston from the Investors Podcast, he coined this thing called the Mayer multiple. And it's a technical analysis, a technical indicator I use where I take the current price divided by the 200-day moving average to get a relative price. And then I like to plot that relative price over time. And so right now we're at about $10,200 on the 200-day moving average, and we're at $8,500 Bitcoin. Well, 85% of the time that ratio has been higher than it is today. So if you buy the long-term fundamental thesis with Bitcoin, then now would actually be a pretty good time to buy it in terms of, you know, just the statistical or the technical analysis using that type of an indicator.
Yeah, well, history does repeat itself, as we all know, and you might not be aware there, Trace, but I'm a technical trader, have been trading in traditional markets for the last 11 years, have dropped everything to come across to this space, and very, very big on the technical analysis side. Before we go too far into that area, though, I mean, when you did, I mean, I'm very fascinated by the early days, right? Because I wasn't there. I'm not a tech guy. I'm an investor. I'm a trader. And you were talking about, you know, Bitcoin back when you said a nickel for that, for anybody else who's outside of the state, about 25 cents. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, nickel, 25 cents. This was January 2011's like the first YouTube that I put out, you know, because I mean, everybody's a Bitcoin expert now, right? But like who actually had interviews, like, and are those interviews on third-party sites where there are timestamps and stuff like that?
Provable, yeah.
You know, like, I mean, that's one of the thesis with Bitcoin, like, don't trust, verify, prove it. Like, you're good, prove it. Like, you did it, prove it. You know, so don't take my word for it. Like, it's out there. Go. Well, like, you can prove it, right? And so,
absolutely.
And so that's really, you know, and that's part of what the ethos of Bitcoin is, or at least in the early days, is all about. It's about being able to take direct control over your data, which we've now been able to turn into money, which or a way to transfer value over a communications channel, over an internet protocol. And money's just one application of this, but, you know, there are going to be a lot more applications, smart contracts, Lightning Network, you know, lightning, these new channel factories. We got Mast. We got the simplicity programming language that we'll be able to put onto this stuff. I mean, like, so much innovation is going to come out of this, and it's going to reshape fundamentally how we operate society. And, these are all things that I was talking about, 5 years ago. And so, for a lot of people, the future is a very ethereal thing. But, if you really kind of understand the pieces, you can begin to see how the future comes into alignment. And then you literally change the world to fit that future that you have envisioned. And that's what
There's a reason why I've dropped everything in this space, for sure. And look, here's a question. So you've obviously been very good at predicting Bitcoin. You've been very public in predicting Bitcoin. You've been very right in predicting Bitcoin. And I'm hoping, and I believe you've probably done very, very well out of predicting Bitcoin. So congratulations on that. Was Bitcoin the first? I mean, I don't know how old you are. I've seen your photo. You look like a fairly young gentleman. But I mean, was this your first sort of, I know you had the blog, and I know that you were involved in other markets. Have you got a history leading up to this of predicting things? Of course, it's much more difficult in slower markets. You can predict a shorter period move. I know you're not so old that you could have picked something, way back in the day, like the internet boom or these types of things. Perhaps you were. I don't know. Your photo is a very good one.
Yeah,
have you got a history of being right?
Yeah, actually, I did predict the internet boom. This is really funny. My dad actually, I think he had a Series 7, and he was taking like an MBA course while I was young. I think I was like 6, and he'd talk about the economics that he was reading with me, like out on the front step. But then, I when I was young, I think I was still in middle school actually, and my dad was like, what stock should we buy? And I was like, well, I think we should buy Marvel stock, like the comic books, right? And he was like, why do you think we should buy that? And I was like, because everybody at school is reading the Marvel comic books. And he didn't buy the stock. And I think the stock went from like $6 to $120 in like in about a year. And so I kind of looked at that, and I looked at the money that I made from my entrepreneurial ventures. And then I looked at how much money I could have made with my stock. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I should figure out how to do this stuff, right? And so I got into stocks, so in high school, I was trading stocks all over the place. And so, I traded the internet. I traded the internet boom. I sold out of that, and I moved into Harvest Energy, which was a Canadian oil royalty trust. And that thing paid a monthly cash dividend, and it went up. It went from $4 to $40 over an 8-year period, plus paying a monthly dividend that went from 1.2 cents a month to 40 cents a month. And so, I kind of moved out of the internet boom into the commodities boom. I'm primarily into oil, but then I also, ran into gold. And so I kind of played the gold market as it went up too. So, I've kind of had a history of seeing where stuff's going. I like to skate where the puck's going to be. And in that process, I've really, I think, refined my ability to look and analyze stuff too in the global macro picture, which helped identify the Bitcoin trend,
So you've had a lot of success, it's fair to say. So let's flip this script, right? So a lot of people talk about their successes, and of course, why not? We like to talk about the things that we're good at, and so do I. There's certain things that I'm very good at and certain things that I'm not very good at all. I'm sticking to the things that I'm good at. But to get to where you are, you've had successes and failures. And as you'll know, as being a market participant for as long as you have, it tends to be I won't say failures, because you only fail when you stop, but the places you learn your biggest lessons are when you make your biggest mistakes. What have you had as a couple of those that have really brought you back to an understanding of, okay, maybe respect for money, maybe becoming humble? A lot of people that make a decent amount of money in their younger years can sort of the first money that you make, you can often be a bit silly with it, maybe get a bit cocky. You don't necessarily need to be arrogant, but you can get cocky and think that you've got it all down pat. You can be a bit silly. Did you have anything like that along the way that you really learned a lot from?
I don't know that I've had any catastrophic failures. I've had tons of failures, but I suppose, and this probably comes from my entrepreneurial background, is as an entrepreneur, I'm actually extremely conservative and I'm extremely risk averse. And so what I try to do is I try to minimize my downside risk as much as possible. And then I've also brought that into like my Bitcoin play, for example, or my stocks in general. And so like with Bitcoin, one of the things I've kind of been talking about lately is how it's the hodler of last resort that provides that foundational floor to Bitcoin. It's the person who's going to buy Bitcoin when nobody else will and will hold it. That's what's going to give this like first network effect of speculation its true power. And so I suppose when I was trading, when I was first learning about like futures and options and all of these things, like I did get kind of stopped out of some of my positions, and that gave me a very healthy respect for how important it is to be able to have the monetary sovereignty or the financial wherewithal to stick to your conviction, to become that hodler of last resort. And so that's one of the things I really love now, because with Bitcoin, it's equity based. Like if you hold these things properly, nobody can get them. Like you're never going to get called out of your position. Like you become the hodler of last resort. So you literally are able to take territory on that blockchain and you never have to give it up, period. This is one of the things that Warren Buffett talks about. He's like, Mr. Market and blah, blah, blah. And like, what happens if the markets stop closing for 10 years or whatever? Like, how's that affect your investment methodology? And I'm like, that's great. Like, I'm a hodler of last resort. Like, you're not going to shake me out of my position. I'm going to choose when I move in and out of my position. I'm not going to have that choice forced upon me in any type of way. And I suppose that's one of the big lessons I learned because, I didn't really understand fully how the different futures and options worked and stuff. And so I got forced sold out of some of my positions and I didn't really appreciate that.
Of course. You talk about Warren Buffett, and I find that very interesting. Obviously, anybody who's been around long enough does find some form of lesson from the legend that he is. Now, one of the things that you also said was conviction. And I talk about conviction a lot. I mean, for me, it's about being decisive and being able to stand behind your own decisions that you make individually. Now, in this space, we do see a lot of people that don't really know what they're doing. For example, my trading strategies are a complete checklist, like a literal checklist. You can go through and tick things off. I'm very objective in everything I do, removing the emotion. Of course, you can apply emotion to it, but you do it long enough, you don't. Now, the big word there again is conviction. In this space currently, and it will change, currently we are seeing a lot of the tail wagging the dog. We're seeing people chasing things, jumping into trades or investments based off somebody's news or listening to, the whole McAfee tweet saga. There's a lot of lack of education, understanding, and respect. And then people go, oh, I lost this or I did that. And for me, like when I got into this market not too long ago, like back last year, it was only last year that I sort of dropped everything after investigating it and got in. I haven't had any touchwood. I haven't had anything that's gone catastrophically bad because I do two things. One, I look at it as an investor. Now, of course, I can't look at the P&L. Like there's a lot of things that I can't go and look at that I would with a PLC. But taking some of the simple principles has helped me to sort of sail down the right path. And two, again, when it comes to trading, having that solid checklist. I think a lot of people lack the conviction, and that's why we see a lot of the volatility. Would you agree with that or care to elaborate?
Yeah, I completely agree with that because the first network effect is speculation, and there's just a wide varying degree in terms of knowledge. We have asymmetric knowledge between people. We have people with totally different backgrounds. They're all trying to assess this new thing. The world's never seen anything like it. Like, yeah, there's going to be a wide variety of opinions, and then people start staking money on that, and then you get volatility, and you have momentum traders and everything following that. And I really like to go back to first principles, and you have to understand how the human mind works. And the human mind is really divided up into two areas. And you could call this our will or our heart. It's our emotional side. And then you've got our rational or our analytical side or our mind. So you've got our heart and our mind. And really, the heart is where all of our conviction resides. Like everything that you do you're doing it because you love it one way or the other. You have a desire for it. And so that emotion feeds out into your intellect, and you'll actually see people, their mind will begin to get warped in a way that serves that heart, kind of like planets that rotate around the sun. Your thoughts will rotate around what you really love. And so, that's like, we were talking about the interview before how I live in Vegas, but I mean, I don't like gambling, and I don't. So like, I'm not going to invest in a gambling company. I'm not going to invest in a porn company. Like, this stuff is not in harmony with what's in terms of my central conviction or my emotion. Right. So I actually go and find something like Bitcoin. Oh, well, monetary sovereignty. Hey, that can be in harmony with what I really love and what I really desire. And then from there, I move into a more outer realm, which is the mind. And that's where I'm looking at the logical process, and I'm beginning to make the case. So like, for example, I coined a thing like, why hire Bitcoin? And I came up with 7 network effects. You've got speculation, merchants, consumers, miners or security. You got developers, financialization, and then world reserve currency. So now we've got this framework. And within each of these network effects, we've got entire industries, exchanges in the first network effect of speculation, payment processors, the miners, companies like Blockstream in the 5th network effect, CME futures, in the 6th network effect. So we got entire industry. So now I'm building the intellectual or the logical model for the reason to buy and hold Bitcoin in order to serve the purpose of the monetary sovereignty, right? And then the action comes in of actually buying the Bitcoin and learning how to secure it and all of this stuff. And that's one of the reasons I funded Armory, was so that we could have a tool, a Swiss Army knife, you could say, to store and to create and store and securely hold our Bitcoin private keys. Why? To serve the purpose of the monetary sovereignty, and doing it in a very wise way. Open source software with just incredibly secure code, all of this stuff. And so, that when you're talking about conviction, if you're going to actually architect like what you're doing, instead of just being tossed around or chasing the rabbit, if you're actually going to take control of your situation and you're going to build, you have to start and build this intellectual and emotional structure first at the most interior part of yourself, and then move out from there. And that's then how you begin to make your trade conviction, right? Make your trade and have conviction behind it and follow through behind it. And then it's like, oh, well, when do I want to buy Bitcoin? Well, I want to buy it when it's cheap as opposed to expensive. Well, how do I understand that? Or how do I measure that? How do I get an objective checklist? I love checklists because they take a lot of the emotion out of it. Correct. And so in my case, it's like, oh, well, I think Bitcoin's expensive when it's above 3.0x on the Mayer multiple, and I think it's cheap when it's below 0.9x on the Mayer multiple. So I'm going to buy when it's below 0.9x. I'm going to sell when it's above 3.0x. And now I've got a checklist. And then I've got, I'm able to take different funds or take different profits in that fund's lifestyle. And so that way I don't get myself upside down in credit card debt, because then you lose monetary sovereignty when you're in debt to people, right? Like, and so then you're able to start building an absolute financial fortress. And I mean, you kind of alluded to it, like, hope I've done well. I mean, just to put some metrics up there, I've read every letter to shareholders from Warren Buffett. There's like 50 of them, right? Because he started Berkshire Hathaway 52 years ago. My return in 7 years is 7x his return in 52 years.
Yep. That I can understand completely.
Like, just to put the scoreboard up there, right? Just to put the scoreboard up there. And so, like, I mean, he's had a wonderful performance, don't get me wrong. But compared to what the type of wealth transfer and generation that we're seeing happen in these crypto markets, I mean, his returns are abysmal, to be honest.
Yeah,
like absolutely.
Well, he's not an adopter. He's not somebody who's at the coalface at the early days. So what you were saying about the conviction thing, I mean, I think just to make it nice and easy for everybody to sort of take that information, it's almost like you're saying it's an internal structure of belief systems that it begins at, which is kind of like that's your roots and the base of the tree. That tree then grows up, and from what you're saying, it's kind of like you find areas where you can actually use that conviction. Then checklists come in, which ends up being the branches of the trees, and you keep shooting off branches. And as we get older, that's just the same with big trees. We have more and more branches that get stronger and stronger, bigger and bigger, and we reach out further and further, and we continue to learn and we continue to grow. And it's a really, really good analogy there. You also mentioned an armory. Now, I wanted to come and touch on some of the investments you've made that are public, that you have made public. You're a seed investor, of course, in Armory, also in Kraken and BitPay. Now, you gave your example as to why on Armory, based on this new tree analogy that we've got from the core of your belief system. What was Kraken's reason, and why BitPay and why Kraken? Why were these two that you felt matched your internal dialogue?
Yeah. So first, in order to properly speculate in Bitcoin, you have to be able to securely hold it. Well, in order to securely hold it, you need wallet software. And if you really want to have safe and secure wallet software, you need to have what's called cold storage. You need to have the keys being generated on a device that's never touched the internet. Well, that's what we innovated at Armory. We created that entire system, right? And so that's at least how Armory plays into it. Hey, I want to speculate in Bitcoin. I need to scratch my own itch. What's my itch? I need to securely hold my Bitcoins. And so that's what we did at Armory. And not every investment works out, and Armory is turned into an open source project, and I decided not to fund it anymore. So, sometimes, that I don't want to say it's a failure because I still got my Bitcoins. They're not in Mt. Gox, right? Because there are a lot of people who don't have their Bitcoins. I mean, I have lots of friends that didn't put in the homework, didn't figure out to use Armory. And I mean, one guy, he's been on unemployment for about 12 months. He has $6 million worth of Bitcoins in Mt. Gox right now. And he's in deep depression because he could have been rich, and now he's sleeping on his parents' couch because he didn't properly, put in the framework. He now
knows it.
You got to grow. Yeah. And he knows it. I mean, that's even worse, right? Like, not only did you took the swing and the ball is going the right way, and then it gets caught by the outfielder, and it's so close to being a home run, but boom, you're on the bench now. But, yeah, I mean, it's very unfortunate. Like Kraken. So, hey, if people are going to speculate on the price of this stuff, they're going to need to trade it on an exchange. Correct. So that's very close to the interior part of these network effects: security, exchange, right? And then what's the second and third network effects? There's merchants and consumers. Well, that's what BitPay does. It does payment processing. So, I'm not funding companies that are working on the fourth or the fifth or the sixth network effects of smart contracts. I'm staying really close to the center and to the core. And then from there, I'm going to put the roots out and strategically take territory as the industry develops and stuff. I mean, I'm not done with venture investments at all. I mean, I'm still going to make them, but
you're still looking for them.
Yeah, but I'm going to do it very strategically, just like a tree sends out its roots very strategically, because at the end of the day, in your analogy with a tree, it's just so great because at the end of the day, that fruit is kind of the scoreboard. And you have to do so much work in order to actually produce that fruit, And
if the roots get rotten, it's all over.
Yeah, the roots get rotten or they get damaged, the trunk, you got all this stuff. So to actually get fruit, out of your life and out of how you live and out of your investments and all this stuff, it really takes a lot of hard work and ingenuity and creativity and risk management and conviction and all of this stuff. So, here we are.
Completely. Well, we're both here at the same time. Now, I've got two more questions that I really want to hit you with, short answers if we can. The first one is, I know you're a big Bitcoin believer. You're a big believer within the blockchain community. Right now, somebody in your position, with your understanding of very early day take up, what do you see as being the most exciting area in blockchain right now? And what do you see as being the biggest hurdle in the space right now?
Well, I think the most exciting is probably the Lightning Network. This is live on mainnet. There's over 20 Bitcoins in Lightning Network channels. This is going to enable huge scaling in terms of the amount of transactions that can be done in a trustless, disintermediated way. And then all of the other financial innovation that's stacked up behind that: Mast, channel factories, Schnorr signatures, simplicity. I mean, it just, the list is endless. And then I'd say the biggest hurdle I would say is probably just disseminating the human knowledge. People being understanding and putting in the homework and learning how to actually use this new technology. I mean, it's really quite interesting. I mean, Bitcoin's been around now, 8 years? And 9 years. It's been around 9 years. And we got people who heard about Bitcoin 5 years ago, but haven't done any homework. And yet Bitcoin has massively grown and metastasized and gotten so much more complicated, but they still think Bitcoin is the thing that they heard about 5 years ago. And it's like, it's not nothing like that, right? And so, just disseminating all of this Bitcoin knowledge, I mean, that's what my podcast is for, teaching people how to understand this technology, getting people to practically implement it, to be riding their bicycle, not with training wheels anymore, moving into the motorcycle, like flying the plane. I mean, there are so many different ways to use this technology. And I mean, you just have to get in and freaking do it. And yeah, they're scared because when you screw up, you might lose money. And that's a natural human emotion. But how much money have people spent on education? I mean, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to law school or medical school. This is your financial education. And at the end of the day, nobody cares more about your health or your wealth than you do, because you're the one who actually has to live with the fruit of that, right? And so, I mean, like you have to have some degree of financial intelligence and knowledge, or you're just going to get totally taken advantage of. I was reading an article yesterday about Kwame Brown, the basketball player, and how his investment advisor embezzled like $17 million, or that's what the lawsuit is. And it's like, why were you trusting that person at all to begin with?
Yeah, completely.
Like why didn't you have any financial intelligence? Like, come on.
And we see it time and time again too. It happens again and again and again and again. Final question, Trace. Final question. I could talk to you literally all day, and maybe we'll do that. But I always ask the guests on the show, especially people that are in the space that are not just doctors working within the area, but people that are pioneers or investors or, like yourself, someone who's been in the space and looks at the entire space, not just one aspect of it. We often talk about the internet, the .com, and the similarities. Of course, it's very different, but obviously, as far as tech goes, these two are very similar in the sense of how fast they can change the way we do business and the way we work, the way everything happens within our entire life. Now, do you think in 1993 or 2000 or somewhere in the middle? Where do you think we sit on that scale compared to the internet?
Well, I mean, yeah, of course. I understand what you're asking. I'd say we're probably pretty early, 93, 94, but it's totally different. And part of the reason is, one, we have all these, we're able to use all these previous tools to build Bitcoin, right? Like we have YouTube and Facebook and podcasts, and we have TCP and HTTP and SMTP. We're able to use all these tools to build Bitcoin that we didn't have when we first built the internet. The second thing is that when we had the .com boom and everything, and the previous way we built out the internet, a lot of the value accrued to the companies, to the Googles, to the Facebooks, right? They're the tech giants. But in this case, the value is going to accrue probably to the tokens, to the internet protocols themselves. So the value is going to be in Bitcoin, and then a little bit of the value is going to be in Coinbase or in Kraken or whatever. I was reading an article, Circle valued at $3 billion in this recent round with Goldman Sachs and Bitmain. Coinbase, one of the largest companies, $8 billion valuation. Kraken's got probably a $5 billion valuation, and Bitcoin's got a $150 billion valuation, right? So the value's accruing to the protocol, whereas when we first built out the internet, like, you didn't get to own part of HTTP, you didn't get to own part of SMTP and get to make money for every single email that got sent around. But that's what you get to do this time around. And so it's like it was back then, but it's also totally different.
Couldn't agree more. It's been an absolute pleasure. Trace Mayer, having you on the show. Where does everybody find more about you? Please tell the audience.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. My podcast, of course, Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, www.bitcoin.kn, and then on Twitter, just @Trace Mayer. So thanks so much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Your insight, your stories, the information, everything that you bring to the space. I'm very passionate about this space. Now, you've been in this space for a lot longer than I. A lot I can learn. It's been an absolute honor having you on the show. Thank you very much for your time.
The Trader Cobb Crypto Podcast. Check out tradercobb.com because experience matters.